Okay, picture this. It's 2 a.m. The house is completely quiet, you're staring up at the ceiling, and your brain has decided to host a private, mandatory screening of an interaction you had, about 9 hours ago. Maybe it was an awkward job interview, a clunky first date, a presentation that went just slightly off the rails, or maybe a text message you instantly regretted sending. You're lying there, parsing through every single word, every slight pause, and the exact tone of voice you used. Sound familiar? Yeah, I thought so. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack the completely fascinating psychology and neuroscience behind this midnight mental theater.
So you lie there asking yourself, why did I say that? But honestly, here's the real question we should be asking. Why do our brains force us to endlessly re-audit an old mistake? Think about it for a second. Replaying that same conversation for the 40th time produces absolutely zero new information. It doesn't generate a new decision. It definitely doesn't solve a problem. It really just leaves you in a worse mood with way less sleep. And yet, we literally all do it.
All right, let's just dive right into this. The very first thing you need to know is that if you find yourself stuck in this looping "I should have said" thought pattern, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. This mental loop, it isn't a personal flaw, it's not vanity, and it's definitely not a symptom of fragility. It is a highly common psychological experience that is deeply, deeply rooted in how our brains are actually wired to protect us. Section 1. Ancient Survival in the Brain. To really understand why your brain just won't let it go, we have to look at the evolutionary and neurological blueprint behind why we obsess over past social interactions. Basically, we're dealing with a massive evolutionary mismatch today. 10,000 years ago, human survival depended entirely on group acceptance. If you misread a social cue or offended the wrong person in your tribe, it could result in social exclusion. And back then, being exiled meant literal physical danger. It meant starvation. Fast forward to today. You have a slightly awkward coffee chat with a coworker. The stakes are incredibly low, right? But your prehistoric brain doesn't know that. It treats that slight social discomfort as a literal life-or-death survival threat. It scans the interaction, slaps an unsafe label on it, and just blares the internal alarms. And here is exactly what is happening inside your head when that alarm goes off. Your amygdala, which is basically the brain's threat detector, floods your system with stress hormones. It's treating social embarrassment exactly like physical pain. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, the reasoning center that actually puts things into logical perspective, gets exhausted pretty easily. By the time 2 a.m. rolls around, your tired prefrontal cortex has effectively clocked out for the night. That leaves the highly anxious amygdala to run the night shift completely unchecked. And that is exactly why a minor slip-up at 2 p.m. feels like a total world-ending catastrophe by 2 a.m. This brings us to a major player in our mental theater, the default mode network, or the DMN. When you aren't focused on the outside world, the DMN activates, and it creates this ongoing internal narrative. Researchers actually suggest that one of its main functions is to generate sequences of imagined interactions. It's essentially calling up old interaction scripts from your memory to help you make sense of social ambiguity. It's trying to organize fragmented information and predict future outcomes, all in an effort to reduce your uncertainty. Section 2. Why embarrassing moments stick. But you might be wondering, why is it always the cringe-inducing moments that the default mode network decides to replay? Like, why don't we lie awake endlessly replaying the time someone gave us a really great compliment? Well, the answer lies in a process called emotional tagging. Think about it. Ordinary, neutral conversations pass to your brain without any kind of tag, which is why we forget them almost instantly. But your hippocampus, which acts as the brain's memory center, prioritizes storing negative experiences incredibly vividly. Because socially painful moments carry these huge emotional signals, the hippocampus tags them as vital for survival. It forces you to remember them so you can learn from the mistake, even when that lesson is completely unnecessary. Success and compliments, the brain normalizes those super quickly because they just don't pose a threat. So the crucial takeaway here is that we're caught in a web of psychological traps. First up is negativity bias. We are evolutionarily wired to hyperfocus on threats and negative cues over positive ones. Second is the spotlight effect. We wildly overestimate how much other people notice or remember our mistakes. We basically just assume the whole world is watching our every move. Third, the Zeigarnik effect. Discovered by psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, this proves that our brains remember unfinished or unresolved interactions way better than completed ones. It relentlessly demands closure. And finally, when you add in hindsight bias, our tendency to look back and think, oh, I should have known exactly what to say in the moment, you have a literal perfect recipe for rumination. This absolutely brilliant quote from the American Psychiatric Association perfectly captures the danger of this cycle. Rumination survives on a clever disguise. It impersonates thinking. I love that. Rumination masquerades as problem-solving or due diligence. But remember, hitting replay for the 50th time produces no new plans. It just carves a deeper mental groove of anxiety and makes your mood even worse.
Section 3. Insecurity versus high self-monitoring.
Okay, we need to introduce a massive paradigm shift here. It is time to reevaluate our assumptions, because replaying conversations isn't always driven by self-doubt, anxiety, or toxic rumination. Sometimes it's actually a sign of incredible cognitive strength. Psychologists distinguish between two very different types of mental replay. On one side, we have emotional rumination. This is anxiety-driven, it's heavily self-critical, and it's rooted in a fear of rejection or personal inadequacy. But on the other side, we have cognitive review. This is analytical, it's feedback-driven, and it focuses on assessing the clarity of the communication and its situational fit. Basically, cognitive review doesn't end in self-blame, it ends in insight.
People who engage in this healthy cognitive review often possess a trait called high self-monitoring. High self-monitors are deeply attentive to social cues, group norms, and subtle reactions. They replay events not to punish themselves, but to organize complex information and refine their future responses. In fact, research shows that the ability to reflect on complex social interactions without becoming emotionally overwhelmed is actually linked to really strong executive function and a high working memory capacity.
So, we really need to reframe this cognitive habit. Social awareness is a strength, not a flaw. Skilled communicators, leaders, and highly empathetic people use this post-event processing to fine-tune their interpersonal skills. It's a hugely powerful learning mechanism. The goal isn't to stop thinking about your conversations entirely, right? The goal is to make sure your reflection stays analytical rather than spiraling down into emotional distress.
Section 4. Breaking the rumination loop.
So how do we actually make sure our reflection stays analytical? Well, the first step is changing the narrative. When your brain asks, why did I do that, try to reframe it to, what can I learn from that? Shifting from self-judgment to curiosity actually activates your brain's problem-solving circuits, which physically moves you out of the amygdala's threat mode and into the prefrontal cortex's creative recovery mode. And when you think, oh no, everyone saw me fail, remind yourself of that spotlight effect we talked about. Most people are far too focused on themselves to remember my slip-up. Next time you're caught in the midnight mental theater, walk yourself through these 4 really practical steps. First, label the pattern. Literally say out loud, this is post-event processing. Simply naming it reduces its emotional intensity. Second, ask a grounding question, something like, is this replay actually preparing me for anything, or is it just punishing me? Third, redirect your attention away from the mental analysis and into your physical body. And fourth, if your mind flat out refuses to let it go, schedule a worry session. Tell your brain, okay, we will review this in 5 minutes. Paradoxically, by giving yourself permission to worry about it later, the brain usually just loses interest and drops the subject. I really want to emphasize step 3 for a moment because physical grounding is incredibly powerful. When an embarrassing memory hits you out of nowhere, your nervous system acts like the threat is happening right now in the room with you. Taking just a few seconds to feel your feet flat on the floor or noticing the temperature of the air on your skin sends a direct physical signal to your amygdala that you are currently safe. It literally overrides the false alarm and physically interrupts those neural pathways of shame. I want to leave you with this final, incredibly empowering thought. Are they really thinking about you? The truth is, the people from your conversations are likely lying awake in their own beds, staring at their own ceilings, obsessively replaying something awkward they said. Everyone is the main character in their own story, busy managing their own social survival. Your small mistakes are barely a blip on their radar. By understanding that our brains are just trying to protect us, we can finally turn off the midnight mental theater and let the cringe go. But it does beg the question, if our brains are working this hard to protect our social standing while we sleep, what other incredible things is your subconscious doing without you even realizing it?